Hello there, and welcome back to A Rose Within the Thorns, where we carefully prune back confusion and we grow clarity in our English studies. So, welcome back. In episode 1, we captured our attention when we're writing a persuasive speech. In episode 2, we built need and we added pressure on our audience to make them feel a little uncomfortable with what's going on in the world. We are now at episode 3. This is where tension transforms into direction. So today we are focusing on the satisfaction section. So we are still working within the broader structure of that persuasive speech writing. So remember the flow. We have attention, need, satisfaction, visualize, and lastly action. You should have already hooked your audience. You should have already proven that the problem exists, and you've built your urgency in that need section. So now your audience is thinking, this is serious. So what do we do? That question is your invitation. Before we get started, let's have a look at our learning goal and our success criteria for this particular lesson. So, what you need to do is in this lesson, you will be understanding what the satisfaction section of a persuasive speech does, and you're going to practice writing a paragraph that clearly explains a realistic solution. Your success criteria. You need to be able to explain what the purpose of that satisfaction section is. You should be able to describe clearly how a specific solution to the problem can help, and how would that work in real life. You're also going to address some concerns or maybe objections that your audience may have when you suggest something. And lastly, you're going to draft a satisfaction paragraph that shows the solution is practical and achievable. So, making sure that you are clearly describing a specific solution. You then need to explain how that works in real life. You need to address those concerns or objections, and you need to show that the solution is practical and achievable. So notice something important there. This section is not an emotional persuasion, it's a logical persuasion. We're using our logos here. You are moving from pressure to practicality, from fear to feasibility. So, what is satisfaction? So, if the need section makes the audience worried, the satisfaction section makes the audience hopeful. Its purpose is to present your solution, explain how it works, show why it is realistic, and to convince your audience that it will improve the situation. This is where you answer the question the audience may have. Okay, so what do we actually do? And this is absolutely critical. Remember, if need builds our tension, satisfaction releases that. You've scared your audience. Now you're telling them not to worry because this is what we can do to fix that. You need to make sure as well that your solution sounds believable. So, what is not satisfaction? In this section, you should absolutely not be vague. Don't say things like, we should do better. What does that actually mean? You need to give realistic ideas. Don't just say ban everything immediately or get rid of mobile phones, because that's not a realistic solution. You should also not rely only on emotion. This section works best when you look at your logical ideas. And lastly, don't assume the audience understands your plan. Lay it out for them. Let them know exactly what is required. So, if your solution here sounds extreme or underdeveloped, your audience will mentally step back. You're not proposing a fantasy, you're proposing a workable plan that we can do. So, how should the audience feel here? So, by the end of the satisfaction, the audience should feel relieved because you've offered that solution. There should be some reassurance, not to worry, because if we do this, it'll be fixed. You're also going to convince them that improvement is possible. And you're going to encourage that they're willing to support your idea. So if they think, nice idea, but that would never work, you probably need to go back to the drawing board because you would have failed this area. So, this is where your logic becomes persuasion. Hope needs to feel practical. In our satisfaction formula, we look at solution, explanation, practicality, and lastly, reassurance. So let's break that down properly. So firstly, you need to clearly state the solution. You need to be direct. For example, one practical solution is implementing early intervention programs for at-risk youth. There's no ambiguity about that. You know that I am proposing an early intervention program for at risk youth. You then need to explain how it works step by step. So make sure you answer the questions like: how does it operate? Who would run it? Where does it occur? And what changes are needed for this to take place? Being specific allows you to be credible. You also need to show why it is realistic. Maybe it's worked somewhere else, so this is a great opportunity for you to have a look at what other countries have done in relation to your topic, or other states or territories. Does a solution already exist? It's easier to not reinvent the wheel if something is working and it's being used somewhere else. Is it financially achievable? The biggest thing is you don't want to tell people that they need to pay money, so make sure that they are comfortable with that decision. And you must really answer that hidden audience question of, is this even possible? You're then going to move on to your addressing concerns. So you would say things like, some may argue, or while critics suggest. The concern here is that it's expensive is understandable. However, what we can do is blah, blah, blah. So anticipating objections make you sound balanced and thoughtful. If you're somebody that's thought about some of those concerns, it makes that suggestion a little bit easier to understand because you've actually thought this through. And lastly, reinforce those benefits. End by highlighting improvement. For example, this would reduce reoffending. This would improve safety. This would strengthen communities. Leave them reassured that if we go with your solution, there's actually going to be a benefit. Up next is the teacher model analysis. So what you can do here is you can pause, that way I'm not having to read it and you're having to listen to my really horrible voice, and then you can join back in. So hopefully you've just read that. So when you're looking at my paragraph here on youth crime, when I'm looking at that satisfy, you can see that I have proposed early intervention instead of harsher sentencing. I've explained what a mentoring program looks like. I've referenced that they actually already exist in Australia. I've addressed the cost concerns where I've said that it's actually cheaper than repeated court cases and incarceration. And I've highlighted that it will reduce reoffending. So this particular model here works because it's clear, it's logical, it feels like you can achieve it, and it responds to those counter arguments. It doesn't just say we should support youth. It explains how we do that. That's the difference between a slogan and a solution. So what type of language techniques do you need to use here? So firstly, some explanation. You need to address the cause and effect reasoning. Why are these things happening? And how can we stop them? You also need to have a comparison between the current and the proposed. What's happening now versus what you are suggesting? And bring in those real world examples. Your persuasive techniques, look at some inclusive language. Make sure you're being reassured. Make sure you are addressing counter arguments and that your benefits are practical. So you could say something like, we can choose prevention over punishment. That word we builds shared responsibility. So we're addressing that inclusive language, but then you could then explain the benefits and you're really using those persuasive techniques to help you further. So I've given you some sentence starters here. There should be roughly kind of those 5 areas. Don't think of them as individual sentences, but they're there to give you a plan. In your introducing the solution, you need to be specific in what the solution is. You explain how it works, give a step by step if you need to, and avoid using general language. In your showing practicality, propose what we're going to do in reality. How does this look? How is it going to work? In your addressing concerns, make sure you respond respectfully, not dismissively. You don't want to call your audience names or make them feel bad, but instead just say to them that what they were thinking or may have been thinking is actually not the reality. And lastly, reinforce your benefits. You want to finish strong. So, as I mentioned before, a really powerful tool in this particular assessment is that partner checklist. I've given that to you here so you can ask yourself, does my paragraph clearly describe the solution? Do I explain how it works? Does my solution sound realistic? And do I respond to any objections? If any of these are missing, make sure you go back and revise. Before our next lesson, you need to make sure that you have finished that satisfaction paragraph for your speech. Make sure you've rewritten it so it sounds like a speech and it clearly explains your solution. And make sure that you've added that supporting example. So make sure you've included a real program, policy, or strategy, and you've at least acknowledged how it succeeded somewhere else. Thank you very much.